to another video, and this is another genre video from 1970, and I'm going to tackle heavy rock music now, and it's probably appropriate for 1970 because it was really the music that at that particular time, age 16, I was heavily into, heavy rock, heavily into, and the problem I've got is that I'm now 67, and some of the, how can I put it, sparkle that I experienced when these heavy rock albums were released has waned in time. But I'll do my best to try and convey to you the sort of feeling that I was experiencing about the music, because that's basically what my channel is about. You grasping an insight if you aren't aware of the albums, and then possibly deciding to give them a listen. That's basically what my purpose is. But some of these that are very famous, I will not elaborate in too much detail because the fans are always going to be fans, and new people to this music are probably very small. So let's get started, and I want to start with the second album by Black Sabbath called Paranoid. Just briefly, the debut album, which occurred the year before. At that particular time, I had the good fortune, as I rearranged my chair, the good fortune to see this band at about the time the first album was released, and I saw them in a very smoky, alcoholically hazed club with about 200 people on a very, very small stage, and the sound was extremely loud, but with the benefits of alcohol and various other substances, it was an extremely memorable event, and they did all their material from that first album. But after that, no, didn't see them again. But great memories of that night with Ozzy Osbourne screaming out the title track. So to Paranoid. So just to remind you, Ozzy Osbourne on vocals, Tony Iommi on guitar. He plays flute on this one as well, on Panic Caravan. Geezer Butler on bass, and Bill Ward on drums and congas. Congas on that Planet Caravan. There was also a little bit of input on piano from the engineer, and that's about it, I think. Right. Opening track then, War Pigs. The album originally was going to be called War Pigs, but they changed it to Paranoid. War Pigs, it sort of squeals out with Ozzy's vocals about the doom of war, and Iommi's screeching guitar with a thunderous rhythm. It really is heavy rock for sure. It's a great opener, 8 minutes, and I like it. It's got a bit of a schizoid ending to it. Then next up is Paranoid, which was the single. It's quite light, really, for them at that particular time. Became a minor hit in the 20s, top 20s, that is. And as I said, a bit timid, really. But it's got a nice little riff to sing along to. Planet Caravan's next up, and this is a very soothing an immersive song with some dainty little congas from Ward and a touch of flute from Iommi. The guitars are slightly rested on this one, and it's an encouraging sort of diversion, I think. Last track on side one is Iron Man, and this is a bit of a monster. It's crude and it bludgeons in its delivery, and Ozzy steals the show with a manic, crazy, psychotic shrill. The rhythm shifts into crazed guitar solos and has some great bass lines from Geezer. So to side two, which I have to say I felt dropped off considerably. so all you fans now can have a go at me. Electric Funeral, it's heavy, but the lyrics are pretty wacky for sure. Hand of Doom, pleasant enough, but the damage has been done on side 1, so now you're gonna die. Rat Salad is an instrumental. Ward has a quick solo, as does Tony. It's a bit one-dimensional for me, going nowhere. And then the final track, which I do like, Fairies Wear Boots, a real tongue-in-cheek title, looking at the afterlife. It's got a skippy beat, there's some rolling solos on it, and it's a nice track. This album, heavier perhaps than the debut album, but it ditched the blues and jazzy elements, and the band were focusing the majority of it on the heavier side of things. And Ozzy is wickedly clownish, so not as in your face as the debut. And for me, The Shine was becoming dull already, which became terminal with Master of Reality, which I can't even recall listening beyond one attempt. So there we are. It's a classic, it's Paranoid, and it's by Black Sabbath. Next up is Led Zeppelin 3. Now, I was a huge fan of Led Zeppelin, but when 3 came along, I thought, oh, I don't remember this. This is not what I expect, because they started to develop their music, and I wasn't prepared to develop along it. Nowadays, of course, I actually see Led Zeppelin 3 as an album that's extremely interesting, and Page and Plant's development was really a big gamble by them, but it paid off in spades. The opener, though, is traditional Zeppelin, Immigrant Song. It explodes out of the speakers, and with Plant's wrenching vocals driven by Page's iconic riff, and you know you're in for a blast here. Next up is Friends. It builds effortlessly with strings on top, and Plant's vocals are significant, plus Page's guitar, of course, and it then segues into a psychedelic transition to track 3, Celebration Day, with some riffy bass slots in over Bonham's drums, and it snarls a little bit at the charged rhythm. There's a very slick guitar solo on it as well. I absolutely adored when I first heard it, and I still love it. Since I've Been Loving You, a slow blues. I love these lengthy blues songs where the vocals and guitars get expanded into wondrous emotions. Plant weds the vocals to Jimmy's playing, and this is, I think, superior to Stairway to Heaven. I think that because it's more heartfelt, and Page is at his peak, and the band as a whole is a one unit. Plant takes off with his Pleas to All, and it's a wonderful, wonderful song. Next up is Out on the Tiles, rocky and groovy to Robert's wailing Yeah, Yeah, Yeah again. Gallows Pole, nice acoustic intros here to a very sweet song, and then it switches to faster percussion driven rhythms with some banjo thrown in at the back of the mix, and there's an oompa harmony to boot at the outro, with a speedy solo from Jimmy. Then we've got the beautiful Tangerine, an acoustic lead folk blues. This Plant's vocals lead into some epic spacious Page solos, and then the pedal steel guitar creeps in. It's very West Coast American style influence, I think, but it's got a lot of polish. And then That's the Way follows on with a song full of melody on the acoustic vocal joinage. There's a bit of echo as well on that guitar. The last two tracks, I'm not going to tell you. No, because otherwise I've done the whole album. But they're called Bronya or Stomp, which is a bit of a manic sort of song. And then Hats Off to Roy Harper. If you don't know who Roy Harper is, well, he was a very, very close friend of Led Zeppelin at that time. So there we have it. Brief review, Led Zeppelin 3. 4 stars if you're counting 5 stars as essential. Like it. Let's move on. On this 1970 dive into heavy rock, I'm going to talk a little bit about Deep Purple in rock. Now, I have got a review of this album already on my channel, but this will be probably about the same length. I'll try and make it a bit smaller. Anyway, Deep Purple Mark II were formed in 1969 after the founding members, Ritchie Blackmore, John Lord and Ian Pace, decided to get rid of Rod Evans on vocals and replace him with someone who could tackle a hard rock style. They also kicked out Nick Simpler, the bass guitarist. Ian Gillan and his friend Roger Glover arrived duly on cue. Now, Gillan was both a brilliant singer and a great lyricist, and Glover also wrote and arranged songs, and he was pretty good in the production area as well. This release then was the album that thrusted Deep Purple into the big league. It was released at about the same time as Black Sabbath's classic sophomore album Paranoid, and with Led Zeppelin riding high after 2 albums under their belts and the third due, the 3 albums released by Messrs Purple, Sabbath and Zeppelin remain the most established albums of that year when we came to describing them as heavy rock. Gets off to a great start with that frantic distortion-laden organ intro by Lord. That's Speed King for you. The song kicks in with a flourish, Gillan screaming out those lyrics, and an explosion of rip-roaring guitar from Blackmore, and then Lord guides us into the next riff with Pace's drumming. Ritchie's rhythm then connects with the keyboard solo exquisitely, and the Gillan squeal arrives. Something special, to say the least, influenced possibly by the old rock and roll from the 50s. And Little Richard comes to mind with Good Golly Miss Molly. After that, tracks 2, Bloodsucker, calms down a little. It's a solid rocker though, and Blackmore owns the riff, and it glides out with great interplay between Lord and Blackmore. Chime closes out the first side. Well, what a song. It's a classic 10 minutes of stunning music. Lord's keyboard line introduces it, which is one of the most recognisable in rock music history. Then Gillan's words make your heart bleed, and he lifts the song into an extraordinary vocal, building to a spine-tingling scream. Lord and Blackmore kick in for a blistering 5-minute midsection that reaches new levels of power and virtuosity. It's pure rock theatre, and the vocal tone is gripping, with the tears wipe from your eyes as you listen, and the liquid solo from Blackmore is something else. This song is considered one of the epic songs in rock history, and it still creates a spine-tingling feel for me when I listen to it. Let's flip it over then and take you through side 2. It's not quite up to the power of the first side, but it's still pretty stunning. It starts with Flight of the Rat. It's a Pace and Glover collaboration, so you can guess it's got a lot of rhythm, and it's a pulsating rocker. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's got 3 solos. It's conventional to say the least, but it brings a sense of normality to the album after that first side. And Lord now shows how he was influenced at the time by one Keith Emerson with a virtuoso style solo. Then Blackmore screeches in and gets that neck. He runs up and down it to applause and some great wah-wah 5 minutes in. And then Pace takes over with a brief solo power rock piece. It's wonderful. Next up, Into the Fire. Only 3 minutes this one, and it's by comparison a weak track. Then we're on to Living Wreck, which is well paced. It drifts in, and with the help from Lord's organ and Gillan, it's very strong again, and the riffs are solid. And there's a catchy chorus. And you know that here's what it says. Oh no, you are a living wreck. Oh, I didn't quite get that. Sorry. Soaring organ, it's a straight ahead rocker, and it tells the story of a love affair. The finale then, Hard Loving Man. Lord is terrific on this track, driving the pacey rhythm. It starts explosively, and then the gun firing Blackmore and Lord load up the pace as we await Gillan's scream. Infamy awaits. The siren-like keyboard and the thrashing guitar frenzy, it becomes entangled in the hard rock sound, and it builds to a crescendo, a terrific closer, and it reminds me of cowboys escaping from lawmen as they rush off into the distance with the posse after them. It's one of my favourite tracks, and this continues to be one of my favourite albums. And if you haven't heard this, I suggest you get your headphones out and try and get hold of a copy and immerse you in it. It's still one of the best albums around, and I still prefer it quite a bit in comparison to their next offering, Machine Head. Fourth offering, I listened to it the other day. It's called, the album title is Sing Brother Sing by the Edward Broughton Band. Now, I put this in heavy rock because their debut, which was released the year before, was the ultimate in heavy. But I've forgotten over the years that this second one was mellower in comparison. But, you know, psychedelic prog, rock, heavy rock, we're splitting hairs here. Anyway, the music's captivating on this album, raw for certain, with a bit of integrity. And it's a refusal really to adhere to that structure, that heavy rock structure that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to run through it fairly quickly. There's No Vibrations But Wait is a fairly rocky number with spoken word. It's got a voodoo-like beat, I think. Then there's a couple of sort of selections that are more conceptual. The Moth is the first one. It's sang by Arthur Grant. The Edward Broughton Band, if you weren't familiar, were the Broughton brothers on guitar and drums, with Arthur Grant on bass. And they came from the Midlands. I think it was Birmingham. Anyway, back to the review. The Moth, it's a message on transitioning from boy to man, I think, and looking back to ensure that parents care for themselves. Then we hit Mama's Reward, Keep Them Freaks A-Rolling, and this is heavy. But it's got a Captain Beefheart style vocals from Edgar. The lead solo is psychedelic in nature. And in fact, his vocals throughout are certainly heavily influenced by Don Van Vliet. And let's move on to Refugee, a monologue about war. They were really into war songs, or anti-war, as the case may be. And it's still got that Beefheart twin sound to it. Officer Dan is a bit of a joke, light, jocular rock song about serving your country. Old Gopher is a harmonica-driven blues. And then we got Aphrodite, off-key guitar work here, introduces a tropical feel, almost Greek-like, I thought, but it's very humorous. And then Grandma, well, this is a bit of a throwaway, it jugs along with a gross vocal from Edgar. Got a Delta blues feel. And then we've got Psychopath, which is another one of these conceptual ones. It owes a nod to Troutmask Replica, a very chaotic blues psychedelia on this. And then we've got I'm just flicking through my notes. It's Falling Away finishes off after the psychedelia from that bit. It's Falling Away. Final track, slumbered blues really. It meanders through psychedelia and Edgar's growl. I think I'll give it another listen. Whether you'll like it remains to be seen. But it's Edgar Broughton Band and it's Sing Brother Sing, their second. Last one on this first episode of Heavy Rock is an album that I really did like when it came out. It's by Atomic Rooster. It's called Death Walks Behind You. At that stage, they were a trio, and John Ducan had become a full-time member on lead guitar and vocals, joining Vincent Crane, who basically was the leader of the band. He was on keyboards and vocals, and then we had on drums Paul Hammond, who'd replaced the previous drummer, one Carl Palmer, who decided to go off and make lots of money with ELP. Okay, so that is the personnel on this, and this was regarded by many at the time as a heavy rock album based on the extravagance of both the organist Crane and the guitarist Ducan. And there were some comparisons with Deep Purple at the time, although here it's just one man blowing a guitar riff, one reviewer put it, after another, desperately trying to push out the organ. Yes, they were competitive with Crane and Ducan, and there was a warp speed sort of organ, which was reminiscent of the style of playing on this particular album. This album was their second, and it was described at the time as a sort of Black Sabbath for the intellectual, a bit subtler. The heaviness is not so acutely perceived because ultimately Ducan's guitar tone is lighter than Iommi's. Less cliched lyrics from Crane, less straightforward instrumentation as well, and probably a more professional rhythm section than the Sabs. There was no basis, of course, on this album, and Crane managed to put the bass lines in through the organ, although often his style owed a sort of a touch to Ray Manzarek of The Doors, and there was less emphasis on the evil vocal intonation that Ozzy brought to the party. And so I hope you got a sort of slight picture of what this band were all about. The opener was the title track, a really eerie opening with a horror movie piano feel, and the chromatic verses are really marvellous. The screeching guitars bludgeoning the bass line from the keyboards before the powerhouse beat and rousing guitar, and then the vocals are very chilling before the chugging beat is recycled. It's a great track live as well. I saw them a number of times around the 1970, and there's a neat piano interlude as well that enables the final rousing run to the finish. It's a tremendous opener. Then on to Vug. Now, Vug was one of two instrumentals on this album. It was a bit of a contest, though, between the keyboards and the guitars. Speedy organs synchronised beautifully with the guitar fuzzy rhythms and solid drumming to boot. It's not ELP, a bit too working class for that. And the guitars, well, they're explosive, mind-blowing, which of course never existed with ELP. And then to track 3, Tomorrow Night. This was a hit single, a minor hit. It's a sing-along melody, really, with standard guitar riff. It's quite catchy, and there's a couple of brief solos for the protagonists. Echoing guitar at the fade-out, which owed a nod to one James Marshall Hendricks. On the first side, 7 Streaks, there's a church organ intro to a rather slow beat, and then the pace accelerates, and it becomes almost jam-like between the two protagonists, tit for tat between Crane and Ducan. The guitar's pretty heavy on this as well. And then to the opener from side 2, which probably epitomised the heavy in heavy rock for one Atomic Rooster. It was called Sleeping for Years, and it had an audacious solo that bends its way into the psyche right from the off, as Ducan measures up against all those egocentric lead guitar players. You know them: Page, Blackmore, Hendricks. And then the beat kicks in with the vocals and the spiraling guitar almost continuous here. Crane allows Ducan to strike out, and it's a 10 for sure, a guitar barrage. Next up is I Can't Take No More. It follows on, but not quite as heavy. Very fast-paced guitar, though, a bit of a bonanza really, and Crane with more prominent here with his keyboard runs. But Ducan, not to be left out, has a galloping rhythm to this. And it's not a bad song. So, what have we got next? Nobody Else. The crazy rowdy vocal that precedes the music, I could not really quite understand. Because then immediately it switches to a classical feel with the keyboards. A ballad with snippets of intricate guitar chords. And the vocals deliver a lost love tale. But Crane is no Elton John, unfortunately, so he really can't match that mood. Spacey guitar to the finish. And then the last track on the original release, Gershatzer, another instrumental, and this allows members of the band, Crane and the drummer, to get into those very infamous solos, which were very much part and parcel of live gigs at the beginning of the 70s. There's lots of power on it. The piano solo takes over initially, and then Crane switches to organ, and then there's some more passive piano. The organ is very reminiscent of Keith Emerson, it has to be said. The bonanza is interspersed, and personally it's a bit self-indulgent, I find, but brief by solos that you hear live, I guess. And then there's the brief drum solo as well, God forbid. And then you can cut to the outro. So there we have it. On the updated reissue, they also had another single, The Devil's Answer, which was quite successful. I like that song, but not much about it. So this was definitely the highlight, as far as I'm concerned, in the Atomic Rooster discography. And if you're into heavy guitar music, I really do suggest you get to listen to it. Also, prog rubbers will probably like this as well. So there we have it. That's the conclusion of the first episode of Heavy Rock for 1970. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a second. I might do an amalgam with something else. But anyway, that's my lot.